eloquent and comprehensive contribution just now put that incorrect view firmly in its place. And in fact, she tells me that as many as 80 to 85% of Sikhs have expressed a desire to have this particular tick box. So, I will give way to my honourable friend from Wolverhampton.
Thank you so much. I just want to ask this. Why is the ONC considerably ignores the legal status of the Sikhs and as an ethnic group and continues to discriminate against them by refusing to put the tick box despite the evidence of the cross-party support?
Well, as I will say shortly, Eleanor, I mean, it's my hope that, and our hope on this side of the House, that the ONS will listen to the case that has been put by my honourable friend from Edgbaston, and I'll deal with that in just a moment. The campaign that she has talked about for an ethnic tick box turns on the recognition of Sikhs as an ethnic community by law. And I know that many in the Sikh community feel that individuals should be able to identify as an ethnically Sikh in the next census to ensure a more accurate picture of the community is taken. Primarily, as my honourable friend stated, the concern is that public bodies do not currently have enough information about Sikhs. The data that she gave us about homelessness, for example, I found shocking, but I wasn't aware of it myself. More data would help inform the approach of the education, health, local government and business sector towards the Sikh community. I believe it is also important to target services effectively, meaning data about such minority groups is vital. Underreporting could allow discrimination to go unnoticed. So, in answer to my honourable friend from Wolverhampton, we fully support the campaign by my honourable friend and by the all-party parliamentary group, who has been tireless and persuasive in pressing for a change, that the census includes a section on ethnic identity with an option to choose being a Sikh as such an identity. Indeed, I believe, and I think in response to my honourable friend from Wolverhampton's intervention, I do believe that there is not only legal precedent in this matter, but I also understand that there is a court case pending on this that will seek a judicial review of the ONS's decision. However, in conversations with the Minister outside of the Chamber, the Minister has convinced me that, that this particular bill might not be the appropriate bill for this matter to be addressed, and I perhaps could ask him to address that particular concern in his contribution. That's because I understand that, of course, that today the bill is only concerned with the section of the census that concerns questions of sexuality and gender identity. So I would ask if the Minister could give us some amplification about that and explain that the way in which the amendment is worded might cause difficulty for the gender identity section of the census and the views that the ONS are presenting on the question of whether gender identity and sexual orientation might not be included if new clause 2 is passed at this stage. But I do hope that the ONS will listen carefully to my honourable friend's campaign because the question of having a Sikh tick box within the overall the question on ethnicity is one that I think may have been going on for 20 years but will not go away anytime soon, and the sooner we can resolve that to the satisfaction of the Sikh community, I think the sooner we can get the right situation.
Mr. Kevin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the members who contributed to the debate. In starting, I'll just respond to the Honourable Member for the City of Chester, my shadow's comments around and withdrawal of the front bench, Labour front bench's proposed new clause 3. I'm glad they found the letter of interest and of use, and it answered the concerns they had. I know certainly from conversations with the ONS, they're very keen to make sure that everyone is counted in terms of the homeless community, that there is outreach work done, that there is special measures put in place to try and make sure as many people as possible fill in the census form. And I would say that certainly the particular issue the opposition front bench raised around those from the LGBT community who may be affected by homelessness in a very different way and have a fear of it that may be different to the rest of the community. I think it's very worthwhile an issue that was brought up, and therefore was only too happy on behalf of the government to, rather than wait till tonight to actually get the letter. And for clarity for other members of the House, I've placed a copy of that letter into the libraries of both houses as well, if members wish to consult what the comments that the government has made. But turning to the substance of the debate is the amendment for new clause 2, which, to be fair, was passionately moved by the honourable member for Birmingham Edgbaston, and which concerns the important issue of ensuring the 2021 census process provides detailed information on our society, especially of the Sikh community. I would say, though, that the government will be guided by the advice of the Office for National Statistics in the recommendations it makes to this Parliament, and the ONS have advised its effect can be achieved through the analysis of information which will be collected under their existing proposals for the 2021 census. Most importantly, though, this amendment is potentially damaging to the integrity of the census and threatens the inclusion of a question on gender identity, counter to the whole aim of this bill. For clarity, this doesn't make any changes to the proposals for a question around sexual orientation, only around gender identity. Under the Office for National Statistics' existing proposals for the 2021 census, it will already be possible to produce statistical information about gender identity within different ethnic and different religious groups. As in previous censuses, there will continue to be separate questions on ethnicity and religion. The data for the ethnicity, religion and gender identity questions can be analysed to provide detailed information on gender identities across different cross-sections of the population. In the 2021 census, briefly,
from what he's just said, whether he's saying that there will be a question, a box in the census in 2021 with a Sikh possibility for ticking that, or there won't be. Can he clarify, please?
Thank the honourable member for his intervention. I'm happy to clarify there will be a tick box under the religion section, but not under ethnicity listed for Sikh, and that's where there has been representations made. I would say that there's been 55 requests for particular tick boxes on the census form that the ONS is not recommending are taken forward, and having a Sikh tick box under the ethnicity area is one of those that they are not recommending is taken forward. And as I touched on earlier, the government is going to be guided by the ONS's recommendations in terms of what the census should include. Of course, when Parliament considers the main census orders, which will set the question, Parliament can discuss the issue more fully and can take some view, but the government will be guided by the ONS's recommendations in this area. Anyone, as I touched on, anyone who wishes to identify as having Sikh or Kashmiri ethnicity or Jain or the Zoroastrian religion will be able to do so in the 2021 census under the existing proposals using the write-in option or new search as you type facility. Briefly.
Ask the Minister to meet with me to discuss this, because actually I've had numerous meetings with the ONS and they've not been able to explain to me how they're going to use the tools, because it's never been used before. This is a conversation that's been had on many occasions. And I know he makes reference to religion, but we are actually talking about how we deliver public services in the United Kingdom. We do not use the religious category. I challenged the ONS and asked them to make that category mandatory. They said there was no public acceptability in respect of that. I think what I'm requesting from the Minister is some challenge back to the ONS that if we don't have data on Sikhs, especially when the Cabinet Office has looked at 100 data sets across government, then surely, given that 90%, 83,000 Sikhs in the last census ticked other and wrote in Sikh as a protest vote, I would like to feel assured by the Minister that he's going to present some challenge back, especially given as legislators we should be upholding the law and Sikhs are classified as an ethnic group. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for her intervention. I'm more than happy to meet her to have a conversation in more depth about this issue, and we'll obviously make sure that representatives of the Office for National Statistics are present as well, so that she can obviously put her points directly to them. But as I say, I would be clear that the government itself, and I do think that the census is about data collection. It's a system where we actually apply criminal offence for people not responding to it overall, that it's right that it is seen as something that's been professionally recommended in terms of what questions are there for data collection purposes, rather than necessarily what a minister personally chooses should be the questions being asked or the boxes that are on there. And as I say, this debate today is very much focused on two questions on two issues being voluntary rather than potentially coming through Schedule 6, which would have made them compulsory questions. And I think for reasons that many of us will share in this chamber, this is a very sensitive area of data. But as I say, given these analytical possibilities already exist, there are, we believe, no grounds for this amendment. And as mentioned already, Madam Deputy Speaker, this amendment is potentially damaging to the integrity of the census. It would require changes to questions which have been extensively researched, tested and consulted upon by the Office for National Statistics in their independent advisory capacity over the 3 years of evidence gathering to inform the proposals for the 2021 census. It will also serve to introduce the risk of confusion and concern for individuals completing the gender identity question. Given this, my early discussions with the Office for National Statistics indicated, as referred to by the Shadow Minister, that they would be likely to recommend this question was not included in the Census 2021 if this amendment was passed, given the changes it would make to that question. And again, to be clear, this bill simply provides for any questions on sexual orientation and gender identity to be voluntary in the next census. This allows information essential for effective planning and delivery of services to be collected, while also protecting people's privacy should they not wish to disclose what they may see as very personal information. The ONS consultations have identified a real user need for data on gender identity, and there are currently no official sources of data available on this issue. It is therefore paramount this information is obtained without the addition of confusion or complexity, as to miss this once-in-a-decade chance would mean the next chance to collect this type of information would be in Census 2031. Confusion or complexity lowers the quality of the data in any census question. However, for deeply personal aspects of census data, the effect is likely to be greater. This is especially true as respondents' reactions to these amendments are untested. I know it is not the honourable member's intention to undermine the integrity and quality of this vital data collection, but to stand up strongly for the community she wants to represent in this place. I therefore hope she will agree to withdraw her amendment.
Preet Corgill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his comments. I mean, I would say it's quite worrying to hear him say that the ONS would actually think about pulling this whole section if this amendment went through, because as the ONS will know, disaggregating data is very, very important. And we know that there's a lot of issues around the data on gender, but certainly, especially around ethnic minority groups. I'm really grateful to him for offering a meeting to discuss this further. I do think, though, as legislators in this House, elected in this House, it is our duty to challenge all public bodies, especially when they are not working, to ensure that those communities that have not been counted, and there's a real need, because actually what the ONS has time and time again said, they accept, they recognise, they understand there's a demand to have a Sikh ethnic tick box, but even despite that, they're not prepared, because all we're asking for is the option of a Sikh ethnic tick box. It's very doable. And we all know that when the census order will come to this House, it'll be very difficult to make any amendments at that time. Yeah. And so any work that needs to be done now, between now and the laying of that order. So once again, I thank the Minister. I would not want to jeopardise this section on the basis of what I'm pursuing, but I will persist, and I'm grateful to him for offering the meeting. Thank you.
Does the Honourable Lady wish to press her new clause to a division? No, she doesn't. Is it your pleasure that new clause 2, when I say your, I mean the House's pleasure, that new clause 2 be withdrawn? Aye. Thank you. New clause 2 by leave withdrawn. Order. Order.
I beg to report the committee has gone through the bill and made no amendment. The House, the House proceeds to Legislative Grant Committee, England and Wales.
As indicated on the order paper, Mr. Speaker has certified that Clause 1 relates exclusively to England and Wales and is within devolved legislative competence. As the bill has not been amended during committee, there's no change to that certification. Order. Order. The appropriate consent motion has been tabled. Does the Minister intend to move the consent motion? Under Standing Order number 83M3, the House shall forthwith resolve itself into the Legislative Grand Committee, England and Wales. Order. Order.
I beg to report that the Legislative Grand Committee, England and Wales, has consented to the census.
I beg to report that the committee has gone.
We've done that.
I'm sorry. I beg the whip's pardon. This sort of yo-yo type procedure can be a little confusing. In order to avoid confusion, let me say order. I remind honourable members that if there's a division, only members representing constituencies in England and Wales may vote on the consent motion. I call the Minister to move the consent motion for England and Wales. The question is that the Legislative Grand Committee, England and Wales, consents to Clause 1 of the Census Return Particulars and Removal of Penalties Bill, Lords. The question is, well, that's it. The question is that the Legislative Grand Committee consents to Clause 1 of the Census Return Particulars and Removal of Penalties Bill, Lords. As members of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. Order.
I beg to report that the Legislative Grand Committee, England and Wales, has consented to the Census Return Particulars and Removal of Penalties Bill, Lords.
Third reading.
Now.
Minister to move third reading.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move the bill be read the third time. I would like to thank all right honourable and honourable members who have contributed to the debate and for the support for this bill, especially from the main opposition parties with whom we've, as touched on earlier, we've had some very constructive discussions around not just this bill but also around looking at how the census can be taken forward to be the best it can be. The 2021 census will provide decision makers and citizens with comprehensive data on our society, and getting the best information is essential for informing policy, planning and funding decisions across our national and local public services. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill is very simple. It provides that 2 questions could be asked in the census in England and Wales and in Northern Ireland on sexual orientation and on gender identity on a voluntary basis. It doesn't mandate those questions to be asked, but it does give the opportunity to do them on a voluntary basis. And therefore, with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read the third time. Mr. Christian Matheson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We learn something new about procedure every day in this House, and I've been here 4.5 years. Can I return the compliments of the honourable member for Torbay, the Minister, for the way that he has worked with me and my colleagues openly on this important piece of legislation, which represents a positive step forward for LGBT+ rights in the UK. The opposition proudly supports this bill, building on a long legacy in the Labour Party of defending minorities and fighting for equality. And the bill will provide, as the Minister says, for voluntary questions on sexual orientation and gender identity to be asked in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland censuses. The progress of the bill has seen honourable members make points about the recognition of minority and ethnic groups, which was welcome, and I pay particular tribute once again to my honourable friend, Member for Birmingham Edgbaston, for her continued and tireless promotion of the questions that we've been discussing about the inclusion of Sikhs in the census. But it's vital that this bill was passed and that work begins promptly on consulting with a wide range of stakeholders across the community, particularly at a time when the LGBT plus community continues to face widespread abuse. The inclusion of these tick boxes in the census is both practically and principally significant. If I can pay particular tribute, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the work of Dr. Lawrence Cooley, the Economic and Social Research Council leader and lecturer in the School of Government and Society at the University of Birmingham. His research, which is published by the LSE, outlines the dangers of an undercount of the LGBT population and the detrimental impact this could have on the fight for full LGBT equality. And I have to say that in the second reading debate, I cited some of Dr. Cooley's work without giving him the necessary attribution, simply because during one iteration of a speech to another, that got knocked out for some reason. I'd like to apologise to Dr. Cooley and also thank him for his gracious way in which he let me know that I was citing his work. Academics earn their living by informing on a public policy and by having their research inform other work, and I'm very pleased to pay tribute to him. The Minister has kept my colleagues and I informed about progress in the area of including participation of homeless people in the census. I pay a tribute again to him for the letter that he has sent to my right honourable friend, for the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster tonight, and I know that he's going to put that letter in the House of Commons Library, and we will be meeting hopefully staff and officials from the Office of National Statistics to discuss their work with charities and outreach programmes. We have seen reports that a record numbers of homeless people died last year, the biggest increase in deaths since reporting began. And LGBT plus homeless people warrant particular attention in this discussion, not least given the shocking statistic that up to 24% of the youth homeless population are from the LGBT plus community. Clearly, we are far from solving the issue of discrimination, but I hope that the measures included in this bill tonight will give us the statistics and therefore the tools to help solve that. We still have a long way to go. The level of abuse suffered by LGBT individuals across our society is shocking. Indeed, any level of abuse is shocking. But I do hope that as this bill passes into law and we prepare for the census, that we will be able to reflect better the society that we seek to represent, and that the mirror we hold up gives us an accurate representation. I support the third reading tonight of this bill.
I pause in case anyone has an inspirational contribution to make. No. The question is that the bill be now read the third time. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to motion number 4 on exiting the European Union Consumer Protection. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is motion number 4 as on the order paper. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. And we come to motion number 5 on exiting the European Union competition. Minister to move.
Not moved.
Not moved. I propose to put motions numbers 6, 7, 8, with the leave of the House. I propose to put motions number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13 together. Motion number 6 on exiting the European Union animals. Motion number 7 on exiting the European Union agriculture. Motion number 8 on exiting the European Union agriculture. Motion number 9 on exiting the European Union civil aviation. Motion number 10 on local loans. Motion number 11 on exiting the European Union customs. Motion number 12 on exiting the European Union financial services and markets. And motion number 13 on exiting the European Union financial services and markets. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is that motions numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13 As on the order papers, members of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Petition, Mr. Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to present a petition titled Call to Revoke the Decision to Reclassify Ministers of Religion under Immigration Rules. The petition to be presented to the House of Commons. The petition of the residents of Glasgow North East at St Augustine's Parish Church, Milton, Glasgow, declares that visiting clergy offer respite to dedicated ministers and bring enormous cultural benefit to the communities they serve. The introduction of severe conditions regarding English language proficiency and the sharp rise in fees for visas for ministers of religion would cause detriment to the communities they wish to serve. The petitioners therefore request that the Minister for Immigration, the Honourable Member for South Ribble, revoke the decision to reclassify visiting ministers of religion as being Tier 2 visitors under immigration rules, and the petitioners remain, etc.
Mr. Paul Sweeney.
Petition, reclassification of ministers of religion under immigration rules.
I beg to move this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr. Craig Whittaker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to start off by saying that Health Watch in Calderdale, like Health Watch organisations across England, are the voice of people in their area on health and social care matters. They also tell NHS service providers and commissioners about patients' experience of care, and they hold them to account as well. And they also have a say in how local services are delivered and designed. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a very rough rule and guide at Health Watch Calderdale, a trigger to indicate there is a particular issue in an area of health or social care is when it receives about 3 complaints on the same issue at the same time. You can imagine then the concern when Health Watch Calderdale began to hear of difficult NHS experiences from a large number of adults with hypermobility syndromes, both at events and via its telephone advice service. So much so that for the first time since inception, a joint piece of work was undertaken between all local Health Watch areas across Yorkshire and Humber, with Health Watch Calderdale taking the lead. Approximately 250 adults with hypermobility syndromes took part in the project, all relating stories of difficult NHS care. I'll speak more on the findings of the report shortly, but first, an outline of what hypermobility syndromes are. Hypermobility is the term used to describe the ability to move joints beyond the normal range of movement, something I haven't been able to do for many, many years. But joint hypermobility is common in the general population, especially in childhood and adolescence, in females, and in people of Asian and African Caribbean descent. In many people, joint hypermobility is not problematic at all. It can even be a bonus, especially if you are a sportsman or sportswoman. However, the debate tonight is neither about athletics, nor is it about party tricks. It's about problematic hypermobility linked to chronic ill health. It's about people who experience symptomatic hypermobility, not just affecting the joints, but also causing very challenging symptoms in many other body systems, including the digestion, the nervous system, the skin, the bladder, the cardiovascular system, teeth, and of course the immune system too. It is these people who are described as having hypermobility syndrome. The most common of these hypermobility spectrum disorders, the most common of these is hypermobility spectrum disorder. Other conditions include heritable disorders of connective tissue such as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, Marfan syndrome, osteogenesis imperfecta, and Stickler syndrome as well. Whilst these are all conditions in their own right, all are very complex, chronic conditions frequently associated with comorbidities which require multidisciplinary healthcare teams for the diagnosis, for the treatment and for the management. It'd be a pleasure to.
Thank you for giving way, and thank you for bringing this matter to the House for the adjournment debate and consideration tonight. Does the honourable member not agree that the feelings of people suffering from hypermobility syndrome is that they have to fight to be believed, fight to be seen, fight to be diagnosed, fight to receive treatment, and they are tired of simply fighting? And does the honourable member further agree that the NHS in Calderdale and indeed in further afield must simply do better to believe what is happening, and therefore they must also treat these people?
My honourable friend is absolutely right in a lot of what he says, but the thing about hypermobility syndromes is that they can be and are incredibly complex. So as I said earlier, things like digestive system, immune systems, teeth are all factors in some of these things. So it's not like if you go with a broken leg, you know what the problem is. There are many multiple complexities around this disorder. So it is difficult from a professional point of view, which I'll speak about a little bit later on as well, but you're absolutely right in much of what you say. What I will say from the Health Watch work on the subject, it is clear that many people, specifically those with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or hypermobility spectrum disorder, are not receiving that appropriate NHS care, as my honourable friend from Strangford has already indicated. It is not clear how many people in the United Kingdom are affected by hypermobility syndromes. Hypermobility is often misdiagnosed as fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis, steroid-negative arthropy, physiogenetic rheumatism, depression, or chronic fatigue syndrome 2. Now, I don't know about you, Madam Deputy Speaker, but after that description, I need to lie down in a darkened room. So imagine how, then, the patients with hypermobility-related problems feel when they have to battle alone with immense health problems, quite often for years before obtaining a diagnosis, only then to face the immense difficulties in accessing appropriate NHS healthcare to manage their complex and multi-system disorders and conditions. These patients describe feelings of being let down by the system, as well as huge frustration at both the widespread lack of understanding about their condition from medical professionals and the lack of appropriate care for their condition. It would be an honour to give way to my neighbour.
I'm highly grateful to my honourable neighbour for giving way and thank him for his work in securing the debate this evening. And congratulate him on articulating a number of those medical conditions incredibly well. I have two constituents that I'm aware of who have a diagnosis for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I was incredibly disappointed earlier this year when the CCG informed me that the Manchester Royal Infirmary, who had been delivering a degree of care for those with hypermobility, had been in a position where they were going to have to stop accepting tertiary referrals for that support. So not only are people struggling to get that diagnosis after years, what we're finding that regionally that specialist care is also then just not available once they've received a diagnosis. And that is something that we really do need to address.
My honourable friend and neighbour from Halifax is absolutely right in what she says. The problem is because there is a lack of understanding about these syndromes, and because not only at GP level but in some specialist areas too, in those areas where they do particularly well about with this issue, they are now having to close the list to outsiders because they're becoming oversubscribed in the areas they are. So you're absolutely right. It is one of the issues, and hopefully when I get to the end of my speech, one of the recommendations, hopefully to the Minister, can hopefully address is about something around having a regional centre for this particular issue. So on to the report, Madam Deputy Speaker. The report was published in July this year, and it focuses primarily on patient experiences. It presents the overwhelming negative NHS experiences of adults with hypermobility syndromes, and it does make for challenging reading. It's 70-odd pages, and it's not a pleasant read at all. Now, the report took evidence from 252 people via focus groups and a questionnaire. Approximately 86% of the participants had a diagnosis of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or what would now be termed as hypermobility spectrum disorder. A further 13% had other diagnoses linked to hypermobility syndromes. It is precisely these people who are presently excluded from NHS specialised rheumatology services. It is these people on who I would like to focus on this evening. The report identifies problems with NHS care in many different areas. In terms of diagnosis, the report highlights that people are experiencing difficulties obtaining a diagnosis. 76% of respondents indicated that obtaining a diagnosis had been challenging. 22% described the process as difficult, and a staggering 54% stated it had been very difficult. Frequently, people describe the diagnostic process as leaving them feeling depressed, alone, and isolated as a consequence of the lack of understanding that appeared to be the norm amongst professionals. This and the level of disbelief, as my honourable friend from Strangford pointed out earlier, the level of disbelief by professionals also led to people doubting themselves despite their symptoms and, of course, their experiences. Common terms to use to describe how the diagnostic process made people feel included angry, belittled, desperate, feeling like a liar, a fraud, and some even said they were feeling like they were going a little crazy. In contrast, obtaining a diagnosis generated feelings of hope, of reassurance, and feeling that they've been vindicated or relieved at having an explanation of their difficulties. On the road to diagnosis, many tests and procedures were commonly performed, sometimes repeatedly, sometimes in isolation, and sometimes in conjunction with others. Many people had reported that they've had many blood tests, many scans, and many x-rays. A number of respondents spoke of being tested exhaustively over many years. For some people, this extensive testing was a route to eventual diagnosis, and in some cases, supported interventions. But for others, this resulted in delaying the diagnosis, misdiagnosis, and delayed support. A pathway would not only be beneficial to patients, but it would also reduce the costs and associated wastage to the NHS of all the unnecessary tests, which are often carried out on a repetitive basis as they are not giving the anticipated results at the time. Participants reported that between 1 and 6 health professionals were involved in the diagnosis. One significant theme of the responses generally is the failure of medical professionals to link together the variety of symptoms and health issues being reported, and the focus on the presenting symptom only. Perhaps unsurprisingly, many participants said that they had received other diagnoses rather than a diagnosis of hypermobility syndrome. Altogether, a staggering 62 other conditions were named during the process. The complex and diverse symptoms resulting from hypermobility syndromes has led to many people being misdiagnosed and being told, for example, that their symptoms are related to mental health issues or mental illness such as depression, anxiety or stress, and resulted in subsequent referrals to mental health services as health professionals could not find a physical cause for their symptoms. People also reported that health professionals had ascribed the symptoms to excess weight, clumsiness, or lack of physical exercise. Misdiagnosis, partial diagnosis, or stereotyping left people feeling upset, patronised by health officials, and also led to feelings of anger, frustration, dejection, and defeat. Inadequate knowledge amongst health professionals was another key theme of the report, and that also emerged from the data. The majority of respondents referred to health professionals either as not aware of, not knowing about, or not believing in the wide-ranging symptoms and the health and life impact of hypermobility syndromes on the patients. GPs were specifically mentioned in this regard. Rheumatologists and physiotherapists, I should say, received mixed feedback in terms of their knowledge too. Some people who had a diagnosis also talked of medical professionals disbelieving the conditions, some being told it's all in your head, or assuming people were just after drugs rather than generally being in pain despite the diagnosis. Another key theme that emerges from the data is poor communication between health professionals, both between departments in the same service and also between one medical facility and another. Communication between professionals is by no means consistent. Communication failures occur frequently and conversations are repeated at consultation. And again, this experience is described as exhausting and demoralising. A number of participants also reported difficulties in persuading their GPs to refer them to consultants. Most people who responded to the survey stated that they had either no NHS care or they had inadequate NHS care. The life impact of these difficult NHS experiences is significant, with people having to give up work, experiencing difficulties in education, problems with social relationships, the breakdown of families, and also financial problems too. Of course, I'll give away.
I thank Alexander for giving way again. He's outlined the cases for the people physically, emotionally and mentally. Does he also, or is he aware that it's not just that as well, it's a follow-on? When you can't work, you need benefits, you need help. If the doctors don't understand the intricacies of the health condition, then how can they put it on paper to back the constituents' claim for benefits whenever they don't understand it either? Does he sometimes become bewildered with the system?
I think it's not particularly me that becomes bewildered with the system. I think it's the patients themselves who are incredibly frustrated at the whole process. And like you say, it's not just pre-diagnosis, but it's also post-diagnosis as well, where the lack of professional understanding, unless you are lucky enough to get a good consultant or a good GP that understands the system, then some of these things go on for years. The frustration, the pain, the stress, the anxiety, all those things that we've already spoken about. So my honourable friend from Strangford, again, is absolutely right in what he says. But ironically, people feel that they have to manage their own cases entirely without medical support, sometimes without fully understanding it themselves, researching the condition so that they can then ask for what they think they might need. This was often stressful for the respondents, the stress causing further problems for these people. Some people spoke of having some NHS care, but for some people, the only care they received was pain management, often without review. There are several examples of respondents being prescribed opium or strong medications, but they said it was without adequate medical support or review as well. In the few cases where people reported having good experiences, and there were some, of the NHS care, this appeared to be generally after moving around the country, changing GPs or hospital specialists, and this usually occurred over a long period of time too. It should be noted, I will say, that not many people commented on social care experiences, and this in itself may, there's no evidence, but it may reflect the lack of involvement and awareness of the issues among social care staff too. A few people have received some care or support via social care. Most frequently reported were aids and adaptations at home. Some people have also been given additional support around personal care and social support as well. But Madam Deputy Speaker, the report details exactly what actions all of the local Health Watch organisations in Yorkshire and the Humber will do and will take on to raise these issues with local NHS service providers and commissioners. But Madam Deputy Speaker, what is it that those who have experienced this poor level of care in the report What is it they're asking for from government, NHS England and our strategic health authorities too? Well, I've gone through the common asks, but I've come up with 5 which I think are probably the most important. Not just me, but what the authors of the report think are probably the 5 key points as well. So first of all, they're asking for improved knowledge and awareness of hypermobility syndromes and the related conditions amongst health professionals across the whole of the NHS. Secondly, they're asking for a dedicated care pathway with faster referrals and a specialist service of some form, such as a specific regional specialist centre. This, people felt, would help to address the current fragmented care that many people are receiving. Thirdly, they're asking for the ability to access medical support when needed for services such as physiotherapy without the need for a new referral. Each time a course of physiotherapy is required, currently they have to go back through the process again to get that and be referred. Fourth, they'd like to see the use of technology such as video or telephone appointments to access medical professionals. This would help people better manage fatigue by removing the requirement to physically be present at the appointment. And finally, improved communication, coordination and information sharing between health and social care, either as part of a specialist service, as we've already discussed, or simply just as good practice. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, some of the above suggestions regarding better care, such as digitalisation and integrated care, fit very well already with the NHS long-term plan. It is very clear, however, that other additional actions are required to improve that NHS care for this group of patients. It is important to remember that the vast majority of people who responded to this Health Watch hypermobility syndrome survey are not those who are referred to the specialised rheumatology services, which is commissioned by the NHS England. They have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or what is now known as hypermobility spectrum disorder. They are specifically excluded from the Ehlers-Danlos National Diagnostic Service and at present have very poor experiences of those NHS care, which, they report, impacts incredibly negatively on the lives. Can I thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for your time this evening, and can I say I look forward to hearing my friend, colleagues respond.
Minister Jo Churchill.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I may, I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend for Calder Valley on securing the debate on such an important issue and for taking that first step for bringing that broader element of education and communication to the Chamber here tonight by outlining to the Chamber the report from Health Watch Calderdale on hypermobility syndrome, and to join him in commending the work of local health watches in championing the patient voice and doing all that they do. My honourable friend has rightly highlighted how critical it is for those living with hypermobility syndromes to be able to obtain the right diagnosis, and sometimes how challenging that is because of the nature of all the different elements of the syndrome involved. Now, it is also to have their symptoms taken seriously by healthcare professionals, as both he, the Honourable Member for Strangford, and the Honourable Member for Halifax outlined. It's sometimes just being taken seriously is the first step on that path to accessing the relevant treatment that you need. Now, those professionals need to be aware of the spectrum of the condition, and all of these things are incredibly important so the patients can access the right care at the right time. For example, accessing physiotherapy if you are feeling particularly unwell and then feeling like you have to go back down the snake can often seem more of the fight that the Honourable Member for Strangford alluded to. So making sure that pathways are streamlined is exceedingly important. As my honourable friend will be aware, NHS England's specialist commissioning team in Yorkshire and the Humber responded to the report only last month, and I gather that the specialist commissioning team and CCG are continuing to engage with Healthwatch Calderdale on the report findings. Ensuring that that engagement is actually beneficial and delivers what patients want, and that it's as broad as possible, is important.